So he defines authority, then he defines autonomy as our responsibility, and then he paints this picture where one takes the space of the other. So if you have authority, then inherently you have the absence of the truest sense of autonomy. So it's strange, because you go into this and you even read the word anarchism and you're like, well, this can't be good. But once you get through it, you realize that there are some incredible arguments for things that we just have different meanings attached to than what other people do. He really paints a picture of a higher level of responsibility.
There's a documentary talking about how us paying our taxes is really illegal. It's not in the Constitution. They were actually fighting it, and somehow, if you really didn't pay them, you really weren't unconstitutionally wrong or something. Supreme Court, before the 1930s, I believe, it was unconstitutional to pay taxes from your job and to also pay taxes to the government.
How many of you out there pay taxes? Confess. I pay taxes, I confess, and the only reason I pay taxes is out of fear of getting busted for not paying taxes. But I would gladly pay those taxes, and maybe quite a bit more when I could, if I knew that money was being used for real needs of real people. Getting rid of the crooks and turning things around for real will probably require a revolution. The kind of revolution that the people of Romania, Czechoslovakia, and Nicaragua thought was impossible until they actually went out and did it. The kind that will only happen over here when more people realize that overthrowing the rich is not just in our own best interest, it's a hell of a lot of fun.
I was a CPA before I started at the IRS. I started at the IRS in 1988. Any Internal Revenue agents in here? Any FBI agents in here? Anybody go ahead, stand up? I'd like to talk to you guys. I'd like to educate you. In 88, I started at the IRS. I was there. I started off as a revenue agent. I left in 95. Anybody know Bill Conklin? Bill Conklin had a $50,000 reward for anybody who could prove, and I'm paraphrasing, that we owe taxes. And really, $50,000 to me is a lot of money. And I am not able to prove this man wrong. Maybe after 2 weeks, I discovered this thing is a big hoax. Once I realized that this was a fraud, I immediately started telling people about it. And I am a certified fraud examiner, and I am examining the biggest fraud this country ever had.
You used to work for the IRS. What makes you say that most Americans don't have to pay income taxes?
Well, the sheer solidness of the evidence. I did about 2 years of investigation part-time while I was a special agent for the IRS, and really couldn't help but conclude that the evidence showed that most Americans weren't required to pay it, at least not according to the laws passed by Congress. When you actually look at the statutes and regulations rather than just the IRS pamphlets, you learn that the income tax doesn't have quite the application that the IRS would lead the American people to believe. We were trying to have a hearing whereby Department of Justice and IRS officials would appear and answer questions, and they pulled out at the last minute. So they act very suspiciously when asked to simply sit down at the table with the American people and discuss what their obligations are. Rather than pulling up a chair, they pull out a club.
The New York Times reported just today that for the 11,000 largest corporations, the chance of an audit has fallen by almost 50% in the last decade.
If you're reading this, you're no doubt asking yourself, why did this have to happen? The simple truth is that it's complicated and has been coming for a long time. The writing process, he goes on to say, started many months ago, was intended to be therapy in the face of looming realization that there isn't enough therapy in the world that can fix what is really broken. Sadly, starting in the early ages, we in this country have been brainwashed to believe that in return for our dedication and service, our government stands for justice for all. We're further brainwashed to believe that there is freedom in this place, and that we should be ready to lay our lives down for noble principles represented by the Founding Fathers. Remember, one of these was no taxation without representation. There are two interpretations for every law, he says, one for the very rich and one for the rest of us. Oh, and the monsters are the very ones making and enforcing the laws. The Inquisition is still alive and well today in this country. That little lesson in patriotism cost me $40,000 plus, 10 years of my life, and set my retirement plans back to zero. It made me realize for the first time that I live in a country with an ideology that's based on a total and complete lie. It also made me realize not only how naive I've been, but also the incredible stupidity of the American public, that they buy hook, line, and sinker the crap about their freedom, and that they continue to do so with eyes closed in the face of overwhelming evidence and all that keeps happening in front of them. Sadly, though, I spent my entire life trying to believe it wasn't so, but violence not only is the answer, it is the only answer. The cruel joke is that the really big chunks of stuff at the top have known this all along and have been laughing at and using this awareness against fools like me all along. I saw it written once that the definition of insanity is repeating the same process over and over and expecting the outcome to suddenly be different. I'm finally ready to stop this insanity. Well, Mr. Big Brother IRS man, let's try something different. Take my pound of flesh and sleep well. It says the communist creed first, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. The capitalist creed, from each according to his gullibility, to each according to his greed. And then he signs it, Joe Stack, born 1956, died 2010, and dated this 2/18/2010.